Hello and welcome once again to another All4 Wofo Lower League Lingo. It's live. I've forgotten what number we're on now. Episode 28, I think, is where we've managed to make it to. It was on the slide. I really should have looked, shouldn't I? Episode 28, and it will start with a lot more knitting together properly after this. Well, good evening, folks, and good evening to you, Andrew Wall. Lovely to see you, sir. Thank you for joining us. And my goodness, boys, news when it comes to lower league, it just seems to happen, doesn't it? You have nothing much happening for a bit, and all of a sudden, wallop, have that to chat about. So there is plenty for us to discuss today. We've got our first champions within the WNL. We've got a WNL Cup champions. We've got some teams that are going to be going down. We've got some leagues to look at. And then to top it all off, Tom Gary has just tweeted that, that expansion we were thinking was going to happen, that all sounded really, really good, gone. So we will be getting people's reaction on that, and I will probably throw that in midway through the Southern Premier chat, because I want to kick off with the WNL Cup, because that has been, lads, I think the most important thing for the weekend, perhaps with the exception of a side that have been made champions. We shall see. But whilst we get into that, let's ask you all how we are. Gareth, you couldn't be bothered to join us last week. Did you enjoy watching your videos? I mean, you're muted, so that's never going to help you.
No, they were great. Thank you. I watched a documentary about Damon Hill, and the man himself was there to do a Q&A as well afterwards. So that was very good. Enjoyed that very much. Just as good, equally as good as John Foster chewing your ear off for an hour.
Love that.
To be fair, I think I might have chewed his ear as well. John, how are your ears after last week? Everything all right?
Yeah, good, thank you. Been on a 9-day stretch at work, so I finally got 2 days off there. So if I'm a bit subdued, it's not because Stowbridge are on the brink of relegation. It is because I'm absolutely knackered.
Well, I feel you, mate. I absolutely feel you. And just below us, of course, he's back once again from Since 71. It is the one and only Stu Barker. How are you, sir?
I'm very well. Good evening. Good evening.
Well, it is a good evening, and it's a good evening to be talking women's football within the lower league. So we're going to kick it off with the first image, which you can see has been very well put together, so well put together that I didn't notice that cheeky little WFA Cup bit sitting in the bottom left-hand corner, which we're all going to ignore. But now that you know it's there, you will probably stare at it for the entirety of this segment. I don't know how many of you got to see this live. I had it on my iPad whilst I was busy doing some work pre-Lamex for Stevenage, and it was quite interesting seeing how this game went. I don't suppose many people thought it would go the way of Stoke City. I think most people probably would have said Forest were the favourites, but a really, really good game. Gareth, did you manage to catch much of this?
I didn't get to see much of it live at all, but I've caught up on some highlights of it. I think the kind of first half for double goals, and that's not a thing, but the first half brace, that's the word, from Charlie Williams was fantastic. Took the finish for the first goal really well. Second goal from range, really well taken strike. Potentially some arguments about the keeping, but it was moving away from her, so a tricky one, I think, to save. But that kind of put Forest in a really good position going into the break. And then in that second half, you thought when Stoke managed to get that goal back, momentum is important in football. We see teams go on and get a second goal once they score, but Mel Johnson, not too long afterwards, only 8 minutes afterwards, getting that third goal probably killed any of that Stoke momentum and a chance for Stoke to get back into the competition and made sure that the favourites, who I believe have now won the competition twice in the last 3 years, meant that they were able to lift the trophy. And I suspect maybe their first of 2 trophy lifts this year. So probably what is going to be the beginning of a very fruitful end of the season for them. And yeah, well deserved. They've got a fantastic squad. I think of all the teams in the Division 1 North, they're probably the most ready to go up, and they showcased that at the weekend. Under pressure at the Poundland Bescott Stadium. Am I right?
It was.
Yes. I think that, first of all, kudos to the FA and the National League for picking that stadium. I know it probably wasn't picked with the intention of it being Forest and Stoke and essentially being a nice midway point between the two, but it worked out like that. So that's good. I think it would have been a shame for fans of Forest and Stoke to have to travel down to somewhere like Luton, which is where it was last season. But overall, I think Forest were good value for the win. A shame for Stoke after Tamara Wilcock got that goal back to not be able to push on and get an equaliser and make it even more kind of dicey and interesting. I also think you probably want me to touch on this as well. It being live on iPlayer is fantastic for the game. I think that's really good. I do think that, and it's something that I think happens in a lot of women's football games, where the hard cam for the TV is on the same side as the fans. It always makes the stadium kind of look and feel a lot emptier than I think it is, especially when they're attacking towards goals that are empty as well, or there's very few fans sort of sat behind the goals. They tend to fill up the main stand first, where all the tiny TV gantries and stuff are. I understand kind of the reasons why, but I think on TV it feels empty. But that's just a kind of a minor thing. I think overall, the more exposure you can get to this stuff of the game, the better, really.
Well, to be fair, you say it's a minor thing. I think that's actually pretty big in the grand scheme of things. It's just the whole aesthetic that it gives. Like you say, I watched it, and as I'm watching it, I'm going, well, where are the people? You put it in a big ground, you want to be able to try and show that you're filling it up. And certainly, as I said, Stephen with Amex this week, we made sure that our VO was on the other side so that you are seeing where all of the fans are, because that's, for me, quite a key thing. So I completely agree that it is quite important. John, we'll throw over to you. And I don't know how much you've managed to see in between your 9 days of work and everything else that's going on. It sounds like a terrible annual song one. But there were some really good ones. Mel Johnson with an assist, a lovely little flick on for Charlie Wellens, who got the goal in the 18-yard box. I thought that was quite a good start. And 3 minutes later, she wins the ball in midfield, just scoots the rest of the length of the pitch, then lets a rocket go. Really, Lauren Bracewell will probably feel a little bit disappointed about not being quite on her line for, but sometimes you just have to tip your hat to the attacker. Obviously, second half, as Gareth said, Tamara Wilcock comes on, and literally her first touch is a header, sticks it into the top corner, and Stoke all of a sudden thinking it could be on. But of course, Mel Johnson was not allowing that, and Cara Hamilton, the substitute, comes on, gives the ball to Johnson, who, again, another little rocket straight into the back of the net. And you could see, Gareth says it might have taken the puff out of them. You know that it did, because you could see the Stoke defenders just heads down in the ground, and woe is them. And they knew, I think, at that point that the trophy was gone. So what did you get of it? What did you make of the Poundland Stadium being picked?
Yeah, I couldn't watch it because I was at work, and it's a shame because it was on a Saturday, so it doesn't clash with any Sunday games. It's half an hour from my house. I actually like the stadium. I've been there a number of times. I've seen a few things, obviously, on social media. I haven't watched any highlights back. But for me, I think I've been to a plate final. I've actually, I've attended a plate final, which I really enjoyed the whole day. So I would have loved to have gone to the cup final, and I'm sure I will at some point. I think it's interesting that it's Forest against Stoke as well. So with no disrespect to the Southern Leagues whatsoever, but Forest and the Northern League is the ones that I'm looking at the most. And when you look at the two finalists, sometimes you can think to yourself, okay, someone's managed to get in there and they kind of got lucky getting in there. Whereas I think these two teams, I don't think there's any luck about it. I think Forest, obviously, one of the best two, if not the top team in Tier 3. So they've got through to the final. And if you have a look at Stoke's form, since September. They're probably the most informed team. That's how they managed to get back up to third from being like in the bottom 3 or 4 for the first month or so with the run of games that they had. So I think it's great to see 2 massive teams in there. I think Stoke will push on. I spoke highly of Stoke at the start of the season. I never really swayed from that, even though they got off to a rough start. And I think this will really give those players in the club a bit of taste of what could come. But no, I can't really comment too much on the match because I haven't seen it. But obviously, I've seen all your guys' comments and everybody else in all the group chats, and it sounded like a great game.
No, it certainly did. And Stu, same sort of questions to you, really. I presume you've seen the second goal from Charlie Wellens, which is the pick of the bunch, I think most would say. But I also saw you nodding vigorously when I was speaking to Gareth there about the aesthetics of the camera shot. So your take on the WNL Cup?
Well, first of all, I had the pleasure of being at Nottingham Forest's last win, I think it was, and they're a quality team. If there's any justice in the world, they'll be up in the Championship next year. I think they're a team and a club that are doing things the right way. You go onto the website, they've got women front and centre. They're kind of doing it the right way. They have the one club approach and they are doing it properly. I will say, from a finals perspective, yeah, the camera angle doesn't look good. If you're watching that on the TV, and I'm speaking to people, friends, other football fans, I'm saying, get involved, watch this football game. It could be a really good final. You look at it and it's almost like it was in COVID times, and it's abandoned and it looks a bit naff and it cheapens the product. We all know that the being in those large grounds is a bit Marmite for some. Some people don't like it because you've got, or sometimes 3 empty stands and 1 full one. Where me personally, I think you have to do it that way. I've been to Portsmouth and Southampton derbies at St Mary's, and there might only be sort of 4,000 to 5,000 there. But the fact that you've got that many people there together in the one stand, from an atmosphere perspective, it was still good. You had Portsmouth fans all together in one area. They were very vocal. Granted, if all the fans are dotted around all over the place, all mixed in, it makes it quite difficult and it's not very good atmosphere. But when you've got fans collectively together, it adds a great little atmosphere. And when you're watching it on TV and it looks empty, it looks a bit, it's not enticing. I've long argued that Arsenal have done it the right way. They've had these games where the Emirates wasn't necessarily full, but people have turned up at the games. But they've enjoyed it. They've seen the better quality facilities, and they'd rather go there than Boreham Wood, ultimately. But I'm going off on a tangent that will probably take up a whole episode because I've got a real bugbear about stadiums. But from a spectacle, I thought it was all right in patches, but I don't think it was a particularly fantastic game. I thought, on the whole, Forest toyed with Stoke City, really. They were quite patient in their build-up. They were happy to keep possession, and even in their own half. But then when we went forward, they were ruthless. So it was a decent game. I wouldn't say it was a great game, but it was a decent game. I would actually quite like it if the National League went back to the original model of a few years ago, where you had the plate and cup final as a double header. We had it at Solihull Moors, and it was a brilliant day. It got more bums on seats. It was a lovely stadium, and it felt like a whole day. Where I travelled up there from the South Coast, and it was like, the only thing I could liken it to would be some of the short form cricket games where you get the men's and women's together, and you make a whole day of it. Where it's quite it's always a bit of a frustration when you're traveling somewhere to watch a 90-minute match, but you're spending more than 90 minutes in the car there and back, and it makes it a little bit harder to justify if you're in neutral sometimes. So if you can, let's get the double header going. But what about that kit clash? Did no one else kind of look at it and think, hang on a minute, that is it's a bit much? I would have thought that. I don't know if that was quite well planned out. I wonder if there were conversations had between the players and the staff and the officials at the match. But they would have had spare kits to use. I imagine that Stoke could have had a home kit, Forest would have had their away kit, which definitely don't clash, or they both play in their away kit. Don't know. I just thought it was a bit of an odd one. I thought they were very, very similar. And sort of the last point is, do we know what Mel Johnson's celebration was all about afterwards? And didn't someone get booked recently for doing the seagull?
I'll be honest, I don't know why she did it. I'm assuming it's because they are just flying at the moment. That's the best I can come up with, I think, on that one. But listen, as you said, quite rightly, a lot of people watching what's been going on. And again, having it on the iPlayer, as Gazza said earlier on, just unbelievable. A really good thing for the WNL Cup, which when you actually Google it and you look back over the history, I mean, I've always thought of it as this level 3 and 4 cup competition, which of course it was. But before that, it's that's not what it was. It was like the Women's Premier League Cup, basically. So Arsenal have actually won it the most. And amazingly, it was also held at the Lamech Stadium. So that was an interesting fact for me. I didn't even know it happened when I lived here. So that was just goes to show how big the game is starting to grow. If less than 10 years ago there was a final happening right in my backyard and I didn't know anything about it. So now we do. And that is a good thing. So there we go. Right, that's WNL Cup. Done. Next, Northern Premier, I suppose, is where we're going to end up with. Let's have a little look. Yay, it worked. So, Gaza, we're going to come over to you. Again, makes it look like not a lot has happened, and obviously that is not quite the case. There's been a little bit of a points deduction. We'll get to them in a bit on the whole. But when we're just looking at the league as it stands, Gareth, what's your thoughts? Halifax not quite relegated, but it's looking pretty close.
Yeah, I think we can pretty confidently now, I think, say goodbye to Halifax. At least based on their kind of league position. I know we've spoken in the past about some other things potentially happening, but yeah, I think that I would say that those bottom two will be the bottom two in 4 or 5 games' time. I don't think that Halifax would need to win their remaining 5 games pretty comfortably and the Calcer would have to lose all 3 of theirs for there to be any chance of Halifax staying up. And when you've not won a game all season, and as we know, Rob Mitchell's on the way out at the end of the season, I think it's tricky. So yeah, I think although they're not mathematically down, if anybody thinks they will stay up, get in touch, and I'll take that bet with you. I think at the top of the league, it looks close. Obviously Forest have got that game in hand. That game in hand will stretch them out to 5 points clear with 3 games to go. So I think that the jeopardy for the kind of key positions in this league are more or less done. I just want to give Feds a massive shout out again. They're going to finish in the top half of the table. They're a club that I really admire in terms of the way that they're running the place. They play a sports centre on a 4G pitch out the back of a sports centre in Liverpool. They don't have these. They don't have the backing of a men's side like a lot of the sides above them and below them. They don't kind of have the history of playing a level above like rugby do when they were Coventry. And I think it can be really tricky if you don't necessarily have your own facilities and whatever to be able to make a match day feel like an event. But they do. They're really well coached. Jan Johnson's done a great job there. They won at the weekend. They beat Halifax. And yeah, I think that for I don't want to say an independent club, that feels kind of a bit strange, but for a club that don't necessarily have that same financial backing, that try and do everything they do through kind of fans and sponsorship and things like that, they're doing really well. And I think they are a team that a lot of other smaller, for want of a better word, clubs can look at, or teams that are attached to clubs further down the football pyramid. They're a side that people can look to and see that, you know, we can be competitive. We can mix it with the very best in a division, and we can punch above our weight. And I think that's exactly what I think so many clubs will be looking for. And yeah, in the same way that you've got kind of London City Lionesses and Durham in the Championship, Feds are another good example of that. Yeah, I think it's been an interesting legal season. You know, we've had a good title race. Title race not over yet, although I think that I would be, with a degree of certainty, not completely, but there's an element there, so that I think Forest will go up as champions, and they will absolutely be valued for that. And hopefully they can perform well in the Championship next season.
Well, like you say, they are pretty much there. Fun fact, Halifax play tomorrow evening. They will be playing against Hull City away. So, bit of a tricky one down there at the bottom. It's winnable. And if they did win it, they would, of course, take this relegation fight they're in into the weekend. But I think most people will be expecting tomorrow to be the harbinger of doom for Halifax, unfortunately. And the warden will be calling. Go back a couple of weeks and you'll see what we're talking about there. But what we'll also say is that they then Hull have to play Nottingham Forest at the weekend, and that is, of course, a big game, as you've just mentioned. That will be an opportunity for Forest to get one step closer to the title. Stourbridge, though, will be playing Halifax at the weekend. So, of course, Halifax might already be gone. Stourbridge will have to win it. If they don't, they will be gone. I'm going to bring in our Midlands expert. I nearly called you a midfield expert there, John, which maybe would have been overselling you slightly. But our Midlands expert, John, because he's also a Stourbridge fan. He spent a lot of time around Stourbridge. I don't think we need to go into too much depth over the actual league, because Gareth's done a very good job of summarising what's going on there, and we can all see what's going on in terms of promotion relegation. But Stourbridge, very much on the cusp of things. We noticed something coming out on social media that on your final game of the season for Stourbridge, rather than actually allowing the women to play as they normally would, they've put a charity match on in there. Now, by no stretch of the imagination am I suggesting that we shouldn't have charity matches and that these are bad ideas, but probably not the greatest of looks to be kicking your women's team off the pitch. Now, if I can just take briefly to the south, there was a big kickoff when Colney Heath had a very similar sort of problem. Now, that actually came down to the fact that a bouncy castle was just over the corner, basically. It wasn't the entirety of the pitch, and they refused to move the bouncy castle. That was the tip of the iceberg, and off it went. But this has that sort of feeling on it. What is the general feeling around the Midlands of what's going on with Stourbridge at the moment? Because it doesn't sound very positive.
Just on that event, there's a great quote retweet that somebody did on there. It was either on my tweet or off the original tweet, saying, would it have happened in the men's game? And I think the answer is quite obvious what that answer would be. So I think the women's fans, obviously, even players interacting with these tweets as well. Obviously, they're hidden, so you don't know who likes them. So I think that's obviously helped a few things. But it's not great, is it? And I appreciate that what people might not know is that the football ground is shared with the cricket club. So in the summer months, it's a cricket club. It belongs to the cricket club, and then obviously the football months, it obviously belongs to the football ground. So I think come May, you can't play on there because it belongs to the cricket club, or at least have to limit the games. However, I'm sure there's other Sundays where they could have put this event on that didn't clash with a women's team home game. I think why it happened, I don't think there's any malice in it. I just think that it probably suited the people involved with the charity event more than it suited the women's section. So I don't think that they purposely done it, although you never know, but I don't think that's the case. I think the general consensus about Stourbridge around the Midlands all season is that things happened in the summer, partly related to money, partly related to investing more in the men's side. Rumours about going above and beyond our means in regards to spending money on the women's section. A big clear out in the summer. Obviously, managers, coaches, reserve team players going completely. 19 first team players. About 2/3 of your fan base, all your volunteers, social media team, pretty much everything changed. And there's no coincidence that all that changed and the results and the attendance and the revenue changed. I could go on, but I think what we don't probably talk about a lot is people say, oh, well, the women's football doesn't make money. I think it does bring in a revenue. You know, we brought in 57 grand last season. Not profit, that's how much we brought in. Bearing in mind our men's team is in step 7. I challenge anyone to say who's got a step 7 men's team that's got a women's team attached that brings in 57 grand. And they've lost that this year because they have cut far too extreme. So in my opinion, you know, but when I'm looking at summing this up after 9-10 months of disappointment, I would say I think they just went too extreme. I understand the chairman's and the vice chairman's reasons to want to make a few changes. That they sat with me and they spoke to me very open and honestly, and I understand some of the reasons behind it. However, I don't think it needed to be as extreme as it was, and obviously they've kind of fell quite massively to the point where they might not even be in the National League, let alone Tier 3 next year. They might only have one women's team in Tier 5 or Tier 7. So to go from a Tier 3 team earning bringing in 57 grand for the season, finishing comfortably 10th last year, with ambition to build on that, to go from that to potentially a Tier 7 team, kind of shows what's gone on behind the scenes. There's not an hour that goes by where I don't talk to myself about Stourbridge, and there's probably not a day that goes by where I don't talk to somebody about Stourbridge. So I'm not going to say too much more, but if you guys want to ask me a question, I don't mind answering a couple if you've got anything to ask.
All right, Donald Trump. Anyone taking questions? What's going on here? Well, I mean, if they have got questions, of course they can ask them. But sure, I was just going to ask you if you had anything that you wanted to add based on what we've seen in terms of the final placings as they look for the Northern Premier, and indeed what John's just been talking about.
I think it looks about on par. I think I agree with Gareth. I'm really pleased to see Liverpool Feds and Rugby Borough doing so well, especially competing against sides that have got Premier League or Football League backing. It's fantastic. And even when you look beneath them at West Brom, Derby, Hull City, those are teams that should have a bigger backing, and they're quite comfortably above them. You look at that massive gap; it's very much two split divisions. It's very much split into two mini divisions within that league. But if it stays that way, I'll be happy. I've always had a little bit of a soft spot for Forest because when I was younger, the only football player that shared my name was Stuart Pearce, and he played for Forest. So I've always had a little soft spot for them. But I think they deserve promotion. I think Wolves deserve promotion just for being so good consistently over the last few years. They're almost the Ipswich of the Northern Premier. Often the bridesmaid, never the bride, but they look like they'll be very well placed next season, depending on who comes down from the Championship, because it looks like Sheffield United would be the ones that I'd have my money on to come down. So they'll be added to that division. And if they can keep large portions of their squad together, then they're also going to be strong. But if Wolves men also stay in the Premier League, then you'd hope that they might look ahead at these upcoming changes and think, right, let's give Macca a little bit of extra money and really, really make sure that we get promoted and stay in there for the foreseeable, potentially.
No, I think that sounds about right, to be fair. And there we will leave the Northern Representative. Gareth's got nothing to mention about Stourbridge. He said everything he wanted to say about us. Yeah, there we go. I thought so. Lovely. He is all in a group chat. He doesn't want to talk about it anymore. He's had more than enough conversations about Stourbridge for 1 year. So let's move on to the Southern Premier. There's a little bit more movement, a little bit more red and green, which is always fun to see. Lots going on, as you can see down here at the Southern Premier. Now, the big thing for me here is the switch over between Ipswich and hashtag. And what's amazing for me about this little switcheroo that has gone on at the top is that this all comes down to one team, this little switch that has happened. And that team is Gwalia. Just quietly sat down there in 8th. They were worrying quite massively, I think, actually, about possibly being caught down at the bottom by Plymouth. Now, Plymouth have managed to go on to lose 3 games on the trot, which, let's be frank, isn't ideal for them in terms of trying to get out of the danger zone. Billericay, meanwhile, managing to just about keep themselves out of it. But Gwalia, with their 2 results that they have had since we last met, they won 1 and they lost 1. The one they lost was to Ipswich. The one that they won was against hashtag. And as a result, it's put Ipswich top of the table, and it's also pretty much guaranteed that Gwalia will not be a fixture within this relegation discussion. We know that MK Dons are gone. Still amazing that they finished 6th last season and have dropped down so massively due to the exodus of players that happened at the beginning of the season. We knew they were relegated from 2 weeks ago. We had that conversation. But at the top now, it is absolutely dead heat. And it means that for Ipswich, with 2 games in hand, they don't need to worry quite so much, because anything out of those 2 games will be a bonus. As it stands, hashtag will not catch them if they win their 2 games and Ipswich win 2 games. So only 7 points needed to guarantee it. But let's be honest, it's 6 really, because the goal difference, I think, is not catchable. So big stuff there, I think, and a bit of a shout out to the goal scorers of Gwalia, because when you start looking at that game as well, it's a 2-0 win. The goal scorers were Elena Cole after 25 minutes and Casey Gregson after 75 minutes. The pair of players between them had scored the grand total in 38 games of 1 goal. And they scored both of their goals there against the team in second. So I think absolutely amazing stuff happening up there at the top. Watford managing to overtake Oxford after a draw with them 0-0 and a 5-0 win over poor Plymouth, who, as we said, are sat down at the bottom. And interesting, of course, that Stu should mention bridesmaids and brides. No, nobody's getting married. But when you look at last year's table, which was, again, quite interesting, we know that Portsmouth went up. Hashtag finished second last season as well. And it looks as though they were in a strong position for quite a while. Portsmouth, though, overtook them. Same sort of situation here now. Hashtag been strong all season, looking promising. But it does look as though Ipswich are going to take it. So, yeah, I think really, looking at it that way, it's been a strong season for the likes of London Bees, who I'm sure will be delighted with what they have managed to achieve so far this season. But really, Plymouth can catch Billericay, they can catch Cheltenham, and those are the 2 teams that, frankly, I think need to be worrying about what's going to happen next. When you look at their fixtures coming up, probably best to look at this season. You are in with Wimbledon playing Watford. That's happening now. So you can always go on Twitter and find out what's going on there. But Ipswich will be playing Gwalia again. And you kind of feel like that is going to be an opportunity for them at the weekend to begin what I think is going to be a procession to the title. Exeter City will be playing Plymouth Argyle in the County Cup. So that's nice for them as well. But to be honest, apart from Billericay and Chatham, there's not a huge amount. Oh, that's a cup match as well. So that's not going to make any difference. So really, by the time we come back in 2 weeks, not a lot will have happened, but we might have a slightly better idea if Ipswich are going to win the league. Stuart, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I think Ipswich will secure that league. Just looking at their fixtures, I believe they've got Milton Keynes Dons, which I think will be a bit of a given. Cheltenham Town, who are also hovering above the relegation zone. They've actually got to play Gwalia again. So that'll be interesting. But I think they'll be that focused. They would have learned from that one. And the only real potential banana skin I would see would be Watford. But looking at it, I think the momentum that they'll get from their next match, if they win that, so that is always Gwalia again, by the look of it, according to Google. So take that what you will. So if they get a win there, beat Watford, then it should just be a procession in the last two games. And they, like as I touched on earlier, they'll be worthy winners. They've been there and thereabouts for so long. They've had some really good FA Cup runs. By all accounts, not quite well loved in the East Coast, in the sort of Norfolk area. By all accounts, often receiving a lot of, like anywhere really, they get, being an RTC club, they get the cream of the crop, and for that reason, I think a lot of teams in that area are a little bit exasperated with them, and they'll probably be quite happy to see the back of them, and it might free up some talent that isn't championship ready through to other clubs. Norwich and Andy Cook will probably be there ready and waiting to snap up a fair few, because once Real Bedford have been confirmed as champions, they're going to be looking to have a real push next year.
Yeah, no, listen, I think you're absolutely spot on. It's interesting that you mentioned that about Watford, because that's a fair point. If they beat Wimbledon this evening, obviously that takes them up to 39 points, and their next game is against Ipswich. Now, Ipswich are likely to beat Gwalia, but either way, that does sort of pull them that little bit closer towards Ipswich. So that could be the litmus test. If they can defeat Watford, that is probably the game where we would look at it, and we might be looking at Ipswich being the champions. Another little thing to throw out there is Cheltenham did beat Forest Green Rovers in their County Cup semi-final. They won just close game, 8-0. Just seen John. He's back again. Hello, John. Oh, it's just a circle.
Sorry, guys. Bad internet.
We're going to blame the internet. Okay, fair enough. But yeah, so just the 8-0 win for Cheltenham, and they will be facing Bristol City Academy in the final. So that's the Northern and Southern Premier. But this brings us to our next little discussion point, which I thought was quite a big one to have, because as I was looking at Gwalia, I thought to myself, I'm sure they went in the Southern Premier last year, and of course they were not. So I thought this was important. So I had this big speech about how actually for a team like Gwalia, they're one of the teams of the week for me, because those results that they managed to get in, yes, it was a loss and a win, but to win against you're playing the two top teams in the league, you wouldn't have bookmarked those as being, that's where I'm going to get 3 points that we need in order to pretty much guarantee our safety. So there's a lot to be said for consolidation. So when you're a side that's come up, consolidating yourself in the league, and I had this big chat that I was thinking of having about how, plus with all these changes that are going to be coming to the WNL and how tiers 3 to 6 are going to be changing, it's a really big thing to be able to consolidate yourself with everything and all the positivity that's growing around women's football, and that can only be good for their team. But it appears, lads, that that's not the case anymore, because as Tom Gary has said, it looks like they are going to scrap everything that was in that proposal. I'm not entirely sure why they've decided that everything must go, but it's a little bit like a DFS sale at this moment in time. Everything must go, and it's 99% off. So really, just round the houses on this one, what are our thoughts on the changes? Because we were all so positive about a lot of it. There was only a few things that needed tweaking, but it looks like they're going to go away and rethink it all.
Yeah, I think that it's a shame that the expansion and the playoffs and those points that were really liked, and I think when I went to some of one of the road shows on this, and they were seen as really kind of positive opportunities to make extra revenue for clubs. There was an acknowledgement that if an extra 4 games in the season is additional cost in terms of travel, but those extra home games would have been able to generate extra revenue. It would have kind of prevented this bottleneck. I think we've got a bit of a bottleneck in lots of divisions at the moment. Would have prevented that. So I think that they are some changes which are disappointing. I think that I think it's the PGA teams that were the real kind of sticking point. And whilst I'm glad that that element of the proposal isn't happening, there was still elements of that once it was properly explained, I quite liked. I like the idea of you've got your tier 4 teams still able to have their B teams in. At the moment, they can't get promoted beyond tier 6, so that wouldn't change at all for a sort of Division 1 North side. Obviously, that would then start to make a difference when you get to the Southern Premier. So yeah, whilst I'm pleased that that particular element isn't necessarily happening anymore, the expansion and playoffs I think were really positive. And whatever the new plans are, because the FA have been clearing that it is something that needs to be addressed and fixed. So whatever the new proposal is and whatever the new plans are, whenever these come out, I hope that still features in it.
Just jump in, guys. If you've got something to say, go for it.
So for me, I think the big issue they had was a certain proposal to reform the Women's Super League and the Women's Championship. From what I'm led to know, that wasn't really communicated with the National League, and I think it took them slightly by surprise as well. Chris Gatsby from Women's Football Chat, he's the better statistician than I, but he actually worked out that it could not have worked if the proposal would come in. If both proposals come in and there is no relegation, then I don't know the numbers, but it was an impossibility. There was no work together there, but I guess with the FA handing over control to the WPLL, the FA aren't necessarily involved in all the decisions. Although I know I think they have one seat on the board with increased voting rights. But clearly they weren't communicating it. I do think, from being involved in part of the process as Gareth was, there is still a hunger to reform the National League, but I think they're probably going to have to wait until the end of the summer, beginning of next season, till they know what is happening with the top two divisions before they can start to really make a plan. If that can be done quickly, so that the reform could fall in line with the same season of so it'd be the 26-27 season, then that'd be fantastic. Because in theory, if they plan for a couple of eventualities now and actually have a dialogue, there's no reason why midsummer, when everything is confirmed for the top 2-tier teams, top 2-tier leagues, that it can't be put through quite quickly if clubs vote for it. Or the worst case scenario, that the National League element to this gets postponed to the 27-28 season, which seems a long time away, but as anyone over the age of 35, 40 knows that's here, that when you get to that point, time goes pretty quick, to be honest. So we will catch up to that. And I'm confident that there will be positive reform within the division. I've said it once, I'll say it again. It just needs investment. It needs to be someone's National League, be that any sort of sponsorship, but the Barclays National League, just there needs to be a little bit of money. Unless someone says I'm wildly mistaken, Bournemouth haven't got any money for winning their league. Ipswich won't get any money for winning their league, and neither will Forest get any money if they win their league. And that is poor. That doesn't encourage investment. And again, I'm opening topics that take a whole episode, and even then we probably still won't get to the end of it. But I think it's still positive. I think change is on the horizon, and actually, as John's touched on with issues with Starbridge, and there are other clubs within division that aren't set up as much as they want to be. So I think we are still in a position of flux between the divisions. You've got, in that time, you're probably going to see the likes of Fulham coming up the league. Brentford look like they're going to get promoted as well from to tier 6 to tier 5. So then you're going to get some more big names there. And as much as I don't necessarily like the fact that the women's football will turn into a carbon copy of the men's leagues, it is only natural from a sustainability perspective. Yes, you might find that the Southern Premier might lack a a Gualia, it might lack a Lewis, it might lack a Billericay, but there are still going to be people like ourselves that are going to be championing and promoting those clubs, whatever level that it is.
I think do you know what, a really good point about the top two leagues, the WSL and the Championship, because I think when we had the conversation on here, we mentioned, a lot's going to depend as well on what happens with the top two leagues, and then eventually they did come out, and it just seemed like neither of them were talking to each other. They hadn't quite decided to involve each other within the conversation, and had they done so, it maybe would have made life a little bit easier. And also, again, when we start talking about camera angles in WNL Cup finals, when you're starting to think about sponsorship of, do you want to be the something WNL? Well, it'd be nice if you could see some people watching it, so you see who it is you're actually trying to advertise to. Whereas if it's just a bunch of empty chairs and the people are all behind, so you don't see it so much, it's not. That's what I mean about aesthetics. John, for you, anything that you would add on the scrapping of the proposals?
I think the guys have already pretty much covered everything, really. I think it's commendable that they've gone back and changed it. But like you say, I think that the hands might have been forced. Maybe not even to do with the two leagues above them. How much power do the teams have in like tier 3? Some of these bigger name teams who possibly didn't want this to happen. How much pull have they got? So maybe they've looked at that as well, because there are a lot of people talking about it, on social media, who are against, for example, like the B teams coming in. They're not holding back, are they? So I think they would have probably voted against it for a number of reasons, but it doesn't really benefit their clubs too much in regards to getting players in from academies, because the loan players wouldn't go to your club; they'd end up staying with their own B team. So I think there's a lot of things to look at, and I do think there's a place to involve the B teams, but maybe not. The league is one of them. So yeah, I think the guys have touched on all the main points anyway.
No, very good, very concise, John. I like it. So there we go. I think I tend to agree with most of what's been said as well. It's a real shame. Maybe we will get into it more at the end of the season. But for now, we've got 4 leagues to get through, would you believe? I told you it was a busy week. So we're going to scooch through these as best we can, whilst also giving them the respect that they deserve. And we're going to kick off with the Division 1 North, Gareth, where not a huge amount has happened in terms of movement, but some reasonable results for Doncaster Rovers, Bells, and AFC Fylde that has just left those bottom 2 positions open, with a little bit of a title race still going on as well. So definitely interested in this league.
Yeah, and at risk of sounding like a broken record, I've said this all year. This has been the maddest league to follow, in my opinion, throughout any of the 6. So I'll start at the bottom. I think Fylde will make a good go of it. They've got 4 games left and a 4.5 points, really, because of that goal difference gap to overhaul. I think Norton will end up being okay, purely because they've got Bianca Rowans up front, who is right up there in terms of the league's top goal scorers. We've mentioned this before. I think that they will be okay. I think so. Yeah, I think Fylde probably on the way down, especially given that both Fylde and Doncaster have to play Cheadle. They are both Cheadle's remaining games, I believe. So that's tricky. That's a game where I don't really see them getting any points. Nice segue through to the top of the table. Cheadle and Middlesbrough both have 2 games left, and they are all of those games, I believe. Not all of them. That might be a lie. Most of those games, I think 3 of those 4 games are against sides in the bottom half of the table. So that's going to be, I think makes them favourites to overcome that. None of them play this weekend. None of them, I think they play mid-April is when their next fixtures are. 13th of April is when they both play again. Huddersfield will host Cheadle, Middlesbrough will host Doncaster. So that, I think, it is going to be the game, I think, really that sees where we're at going into the final game of the season. The final game of the season is Cheadle host Fylde and Barnsley host Middlesbrough. So Middlesbrough with Doncaster and Barnsley, Cheadle with Huddersfield and Fylde. I genuinely think that we could see this league come down to goal difference, and it's not just one team having wildly better goal difference than the other. They have both scored 35 goals. The difference is Cheadle have conceded 10 and Middlesbrough have conceded 13. That is genuinely the only difference between these sides at the moment, is one of them has conceded 3 goals fewer than the other. I think if it does end up staying as it is, Middlesbrough will look back at this season and see it as a disappointing one, which is tricky to say when you come runner-up. But those 6 draws, having only lost once, not if they convert one of those draws into a win, then they go up as champions. So we will see how that goes. But yeah, I think on the 13th of April, so 2 weeks' time, 2 weeks on Sunday, Cheadle against Huddersfield. That's massive. Middlesbrough will be desperately hoping Huddersfield can do them a favour, because I think that's the only game I can see potential not being a win for the title challengers. And yeah, I will leave it at that. I think there's been some real good battles all year. That mid-table looks super, super close. We've spoken before about teams potentially being dragged into relegation battles, but I think Stockport, Barnsley, Durham are safe now. Leeds and Huddersfield and Chorley flirted with a title race at one point, but I think we are sort of down to a 2-horse race for the championship, and then York, Norton, Doncaster and Fylde fighting it out for the bottom 2 spots, which, less than a month out from the season, to have 4 teams fighting promotion and your title race potentially coming down to goal difference is the icing on a crazy, crazy year.
No, absolutely. And like you say, not a lot happening in that league over the next couple of weeks. Huddersfield will be busy though, because they're playing Chorley at the weekend. So that's almost like a little battle there to try and get themselves in a position to finish third. York will be playing Norton next weekend. And I think in the relegation one, that's where the game in hand comes in. So that will be quite interesting to see what happens there, because obviously if York win that, then they are safe. And if Norton win that, then they are technically safe, although not mathematically so because of goal difference. So, yeah, a lot happening down there at the bottom as well. Not to mention 2 county cup matches to be happening. Leeds playing the mighty Knaresborough Town, and Donny's Rovers Bells are playing Huddersfield Town. And then, of course, it'll be the 13th, and that's when all of Gazza's points come true. So very good. That's Division 1 North. When we move over to the Midlands, as you can see, it is steady as you go, Jonathan. Not a huge amount occurring over there in the midfield. Lincoln City, though, are the first club, I believe, to have a negative 100 goal difference for the season. I feel a bit bad bringing that up, but I had to extend my column to have that go in. So that obviously hit my mind there. Only really Worcester, I think, that can go down alongside them. It's Worcester or Solihull. So what's going on, mate?
I think everyone was talking about that Northampton 12-0 win against Lincoln City, but not necessarily for the 12-0 scoreline, more to do with one particular goal scorer, Jade Bell, with 8 of those goals. So Jade Bell's got 33 goals there for the season, and she's obviously flying and going to win that Golden Boot quite comfortably. But not just because of this game. I think she's probably scored twice the amount of the player who's in second. So, fair play to her. So to score 8 goals in any league game is one to shout out. Kim Farrow with 2 goals, and Faith Horner with another 2 goals. I'm just going to shout out some of the scores and scorers on the weekend just gone. So Leafield won 7-1 against Solihull Moors. Evangelina Gallup. You'll start recognising some of these names when I shout them out. But Gallup got a hat trick. Janelle Straker with a goal. Lucy Davis, Tiara Jade, and Angie Morley in a stoppage time with a stoppage time goal. And Georgia Neath for Solihull Moors getting their goal there. And Leithfield is still going strong. You know, they've still got something along the lines of out of 19 games this season, I think they've only lost like 3 or something like that. So they're still within a shout. So if Loughborough do mess up, they're only 3 points away from contention. So it's not too bad at all. Peterborough winning 1-0 away from home against a very strong Lincoln United team. Keir Perkins with a first half stoppage time goal there. And they're only 1 point off the top spot as well. And teams still need to play each other. You know, there's 4 teams at the top, and there's games where they're still going to clash and they're going to play each other. So it's not all over yet. You know, Loughborough's got some tough games still to come. I mentioned the Northampton and Lincoln City game, and then also Bournemouth. So Bournemouth won 3-2 away, and it was actually Notts County who got off to a good start there. But unfortunately, Barnes' 2 goals was overshadowed by Leona Joyce and a couple of other players. Gregory was one, I can't remember the other player. But Leona Joyce has scored pretty much every game since she's come back from injury. And Bournemouth really created something there. If Carl Henry does stay into next season, you know, the signings that he's made, not just summer just gone, but more importantly throughout the season, is building a good mixture of young players in the area who are up and coming, but also some real consistent performers in Tier 4 for the years gone by. And then Worcester 2, Sutton Coldfield 3. So Worcester actually scored the first 2 goals. 2-2 for Annie Highway now. But then, unfortunately, for Worcester, it was Sutton who scored 3 goals. Freya Smith, Lauren De Casto, and Amelia Kirk. So they, with their new manager, he's got now 2 wins out of 3. But I think Worcester will be safe. I do think it'll be the 2 that's currently in the bottom 2 that will stay there. But still all to play for at the top and the bottom, in my opinion.
No, absolutely, and you're right. And that result there for Worcester City has meant that they are still in with a shout of going down. It would have been all over had they managed to get the win there against Sutton Coldfield. As you mentioned as well, some big things happening still at the top. Loughborough Lightning will have their 2 games in hand finished by the time we are talking next. So we will see whether or not Loughborough Lightning are 6 points clear of Northampton or not. If they are, obviously, it will mean they just need a point to guarantee the title. But they've got to beat Leithfield away and Peterborough United away over the next 2 weeks to be able to do that. So it's not as simple, like you just said, there at all. Huddersfield Town will be playing Barnsley, winning the County Cup as well. Peterborough United have then got to play Leithfield as well. So those 4 teams have all got their little games in hand, all coming up over the next 2 weekends. So lots still to look forward to in Division 1 Midlands. I am going to scoot through the Southeast because there's not a massive amount to run through here. As you can see, it's all pretty much as it was before, with the exception of Chatham overtaking London Bees. They did that because they managed to relegate Ashford Town officially by bopping them 6-0. And as a result, they went above London Bees, who lost. And they lost to Norwich City, which means that there is obviously that gap now of 5 points. Chatham Town could reduce that to 2, but in all honesty, it's a procession. We're just waiting for the moment when Real Bedford will be crowned the Division 1 South East champions. They've got a game in hand. Obviously, that game in hand is incredibly helpful for them, but they've still got to win it. If they do, then of course they are champions. If they don't, then of course they are not. It's a very simple little equation for you there. So it's looking pretty good for Real Bedford at the top. As we said, Ashford and London Seaward are now down, so that will be the end of them. And it does look to me, I would imagine that both of them would end up in the London and South East regional, if I'm honest. So I can see Barking potentially. It'll be very interesting to see if I get this right when we get to next season, but I can see Barking coming back into the Eastern region. So a little bit of jiggery pokery needing to happen in order for these teams to be okay. But of course, it also depends on who's coming up. So lots to look forward to there. There's lots of jiggery pokery that occurs down at the bottom. I suppose really other big things to mention in the middle, Actonians had a 6-0 win against London Seaward, which was great for them. QPR winning 1-0 away to Dulwich, and AFC Sudbury beating Cambridge 4-2 on another away game there. And all of those have not really changed the positions at all. Some other big games that occurred. Real Bedford are the Bedfordshire County Cup champions. They took on second place in Tier 5, Luton Town, and it was not even close. 5-0 to Real Bedford, and that was a painful lesson, I think, for Luton to go through. But we also have some County Cup matches that have happened. So in the Capital Cup quarter final, Enfield lost to Dulwich Hamlet, and of course you see are in 8th position here. They will go into the semi-final where they will play the Tottenham Hotspur Academy, and AFC Sudbury, who you see there in 7th, they managed to beat Needham Market in the Suffolk County Cup. They will be in the final against Bungay Town. And interestingly enough, every time I hear the word Bungay Town, all I can think of is Bungle from Rainbow. So there we go. That's just a little insight into what's going on in my mind. There is not a huge amount going on over the next couple of weeks. As we've said in the WNL, Ashford Town will play QPR, but it is really not anything in that, with there being no money going into these positions. It really is a case of pride and best finishes that people are looking for. Real Bedford will be away to AFC Sudbury, and of course, although that's not guaranteed, if they win it there, as we said, the title will be going to Bedford. Ashford Town will again have to play London Seaward, so there'll be a nice little game there to see which team finishing bottom and which team will not, I think, is the general gist of that one. And Billericay, of course, we've got Chatham Town in the County Cup, and the Chatham Town at the weekend will go away to AFC Sudbury, again with Chatham Town really looking to finish 3rd. There's not a huge amount to add on the Division 1 South East there, so I will throw it over to the man that is Stu Barker, because you'll notice on here that we have got a rather snazzy little letter put at the top of your league, and I'd say that not to rub your nose into anything whatsoever. We have our first champions on the Lower League Lingo show. We've not had this yet. We would have done had there been a conversation happening about Tier 5. We're not on that yet. We might end with that. But in Tier 4, we have got our first champions in the WNL. So we very much needed to celebrate that. So I've given them a nice little inflatable balloon type, because there are no other real types of balloons, to be fair, for them. They are the champions. We have got a relegated side as well. Talk to us, Stu. The Division 1 Southwest, are they the rightful winners?
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. They haven't won all those games by fluke. The biggest killer for me personally is that this time last week it was Bournemouth taking on the Mighty Money, my Mighty Moneyfields, and we missed an added time penalty from us was saved by Aaron Foley to give Bournemouth a 2-1 win. And while we were never going to overtake them, it would have been nice if we could have delayed the celebrations for at least a week. But yeah, they're worthy winners. They've been absolutely smashing it. They've got players that are on wages that most of the 3rd tier would be envious of. So from a resources perspective, yes, they're kind of on par where they should be, to be honest. Anything less than what they've done would be a little bit of a failure, but I don't want to put a negative tinge on it because they've been awesome. But they've been, well, the expression goes, men amongst boys, although the gender equivalent sort of women around girls, I don't know. I'm happy for them, but I'm still a little bit bitter of last week's failure to us to get a draw, and last weekend's draw, which we'll move on to in a minute. But fundamentally, congratulations to Bournemouth. They've been brilliant, and I've long been shouting that Premier League, Football League back clubs should be investing in their team. And Bournemouth, to be fair, they've done that. They are another one like Nottingham Forest, who are running as one club. They are fully behind the women. They are fully behind the manager, and that's fantastic for women's football. They're an absolute credit, and they have got an absolutely top quality bunch. They will do very well next season. We'll talk about next season more in the previews, but yeah, they've done very, very well, and the 2-0 win over Bristol Rovers to confirm that victory. So for Bristol Rovers, I think their form has dipped over the last sort of 5 to 6 weeks, but as a newly promoted side, they can be really proud that they're looking at 5th place finish and potentially maybe even a 4th place finish. I'm sure if you'd have offered them a top 4 at the or top 5 at the beginning of the season, they'd have been quite happy with that. Whether they will get that 4th spot, don't know, because Worthing seem to be having a bit of a time of it at the moment. They lost 2-1 to Abingdon with an added time goal there. And Abingdon have now, you'll see, a 9th have secured their place in the division for next season. Well, there might be some mathematics that could see them go down, but in reality, that's their man, them safe. I think they're going to have enough. Bournemouth Sports picked up a point against Moneyfields, my team. Again, that's another result that's still a bit of a sore point for me at the moment. We had one of those games where we hit the crossbar. We forced the keeper into a lot of saves. We had an added time goal disallowed for offside, and by all accounts, those that were in better positions than I were stated that our player was a couple of yards onside. And not to mention, we had a handball that was disallowed because the unnatural position was judged. The referee said the player protecting their face. I still think that's an unnatural position, given that you can use your head as part of the to play football. But I'm bitter and I'm sad about it. But every club has those games. It's coulda, shoulda, woulda, and the reality is, Moneyfields need 2 points to secure second position, and they've got 2 games to do so against Portishead and Swindon. So the reality is it hasn't made a huge amount of difference, and hopefully by the next time we can set on the pitch, it will be quickly forgotten. But outside of that, the other notable results were a 2-1 win for Keynsham against Bridgewater, which has given them that little bit of breathing space to secure a top 6 finish. And other than that, the league is relatively settled. Congratulations to Bournemouth; they've been fantastic, and they are the story of the week, and this should be the story of the week. 18 wins, it's fantastic.
There speaks a broken man, and back together. Do not fear in that respect. You're quite right what you said. There are some mathematics involved with the relegation. Abingdon will, of course, be playing Bridgewater at the weekend, so that will be quite interesting to see how they get on. Bournemouth Sports play Maidenhead, which is, of course, a very tricky little one there. If Bournemouth Sports can get the win, it it does pretty much Portishead out of it. Portishead will have to go away to Bristol Rovers, which is, of course, not going to be an easy one in that weekend. And then, of course, the weekend after, none of them really play, only Southampton women in the bottom. So by the time we meet again, we shan't be that much further forward, but we will have an idea of Maidenhead, Abingdon, Bournemouth and Portishead, quite where those mathematics lie. We're going to finish. You'll have noticed that John has disappeared. Apparently, he had 4% battery. I presume that has now just dropped down to 0. So RIP John's battery. He won't be able to take part in these final celebrations because our final celebrations go to Gareth. Now, last time we were together 2 weeks ago, before you went to Blockbusters to go and rent out some videos, you were celebrating the fact that Matt Crane had won the league with his side. I'm going to say it's the reserves, but yes, it was good, lovely. I can There's under 23s. There's so many now. I don't quite know where we are. But Wythenshawe, and we will talk about this properly next week, but it would be wrong of us whilst you're here not to say congratulations, Gareth, for winning your league. How are you feeling?
Sunday was fantastic. Like it was great. We knew going in that a win would do it. And yeah, we did. We won 6-0, so pretty comfortable in the end. So yeah, celebrations happened, trophy deposited, and all in all, a good season for us. Doesn't kind of stop what we want to do. We've still got 4 games left. We've not lost a game at all this season. We've not lost a league game at home since we took over, sort of 2 years ago. So obviously we want those. We're unbeaten in the league for over 400 days now. So we want those records to carry on into next season, where obviously the planning starts now for making that step up to the National League. Lots more paperwork for me, I think, compared to regional leagues. But yeah, it's fantastic. And I think a lot of us, when we made that move from FC United a couple of years ago, really bought into the kind of vision that the club had and the support that the club were giving, and it's been fantastic. And every single player, coach that has kind of come along in the journey of the last couple of years, whether that was for a couple of months, whether that was 1 game, 50 games, whatever that's been, everyone's played their part, and it's been a real squad effort. And long may that continue. And hopefully, when we chat next week, we've got Tranmere at the weekend. We'll still be unbeaten. Tranmere are one of the 2 games we've drawn this year. So hopefully, fingers crossed, touch wood, all that stuff. We'll still be unbeaten come next Wednesday, and we can have a proper chat about it then.
Watch out for Madison Handley. I was going to say, watch out for Madison Handley. No, that's Preston.
Yeah, she's a Preston. We put 7 days in for her earlier in the year, and she decided to stay because she's a real threat. So I'm thankful that she's at Preston and not at Tranmere.
Apologies to Tranmere fans there.
But yeah, there we go. Half time, Wimbledon 0. Watford 0. Sorry, not Watford. MK Dons 0. So there we go. That's quite.
You're right first time. Wimbledon, Watford.
Shocking, isn't it? I don't know how I get the job really, but there we are. It's happened. Jeff Stellman had these problems,
and you couldn't have got it any worse to getting Wimbledon and MK Dons mixed up.
Well, I got Wimbledon right. I got MK Dons and Watford mixed up, so that's a bonus. Yeah. Well, if I'd done that, I'd have to go to Ireland for at least 7 days.
We all probably need some dinner and a cup of tea, I think.
Yeah, correct. I think so.
We're cracking up. We're cracking up.
So we'll say goodbye for John because he's there somewhere now. Obviously, still looking for a charger. He obviously hasn't found one. Poor little thing. So there we go. It's been a pleasure. Brilliant to get him. We are most of us are celebrating the fact that we have our first champions in the WNL. We've got our WNL Cup champions as well. Still a lot of stories to tell, though, and that is a good job because we're going to be back next week telling some more. Till then, take care, everyone.